You just want to go around and give us like a quick introduction to yourself, what you do for work, just a quick little intro. And Kaitlyn, Reid, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Kaitlyn. I work on Sony Music's global streaming team. So I basically work on global streaming strategy for all of our US signed artists, ex-US. So like Travis Scott, SZA, Beyonce, Harry Styles, Miley Cyrus, and more.
Awesome. And Kaitlyn Sperduto, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Kaitlyn. I work in sales and streaming at Atlantic Records. I'm from New Jersey. I've been at Atlantic for about a year. Before that, I was in artist marketing at Ticketmaster. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Celena, you're up.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Celena Fields. I do artist marketing at Apple Music, and I specifically focus on emerging artists in our Up Next program.
Okay, Adrienne, it's all you. Oh, you're on mute, Adrienne.
That is a typical fail. Okay. I'm Adrienne. I work at Warner Records on the commercial revenue team, aka streaming, and I focus on all the dance and pop releases that we have coming out, like David Guetta, Bebe Rexha, Dua Lipa, etc.
Awesome. Okay, Brittany, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Brittany Holloway. I currently work at Soundcloud as a product marketing manager for the creator services team. So constantly working on bringing new tools and services to creators so that they can help grow their careers. And prior to that, I was at Pandora for a few years and TuneCore before that.
Awesome. And Aliyah, you're up.
Hi ladies, I'm Aliyah. Like Olivia said, I work at Audiomack as a marketing coordinator, and believe it or not, this is actually my first music industry job. Prior to that, I worked at corporate, advertising, makeup, you name it.
Awesome. Thank you all. As you can see, we have an amazing group of women here with us today to talk about streaming. So we're going to jump right into it. So this is a bit of a broad question, but everyone feel free to jump in as you see fit. What does your day-to-day look like in music streaming?
I can take it since I'm off mute.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's changing each day with an influx of even more email, and I'm sure everyone's getting more FaceTime on the computer than ever before. But day to day, my job consists of updating DSPs or digital service providers with our new releases and keeping them up to date with the timeline, giving them assets, and then of course formulating pitches for them so that they can kind of sort out if it would work in the editorial space. And we also pitch and like hope for marketing support from the streaming services as well, and that includes like billboards and social media support on their end. And yeah, and I focus, like I said, on all the pop and dance music that's coming out. And then there's a million team meetings in between when we're planning and releasing and everything you can imagine that it takes to get a song out.
Yep, absolutely.
I guess I can go. I agree. It's like probably like the most dynamic part of the industry, so it's constantly changing. I feel like what we were working on 3 months ago, 6 months ago is like totally different than what we're working on today. So there's definitely like no typical day, but for me specifically, I'm working with all of our international territories. So it's kind of a combination of, analyzing consumption, seeing where the opportunities are, working with the markets and the territories to see how we can, drive streaming from one market to the next and how each market layers into the others. And then working on like larger company initiatives as well to try to drive better global streaming performance across our total roster. But it changes day to day. So it's definitely, working with the teams that then are working with the partners like Spotify, Apple Music, etc. But then taking like a holistic view of like what's happening globally, what are the trends, and how can we use that to inform our strategy for like upcoming releases.
Awesome.
I'm happy to chime in as well. So on my side, being at SoundCloud, a lot of my day is spent looking at feedback, both quantitative and qualitatively, to say, okay, here's what we've heard artists are looking for, here's what they think they need, here's the data that shows how they're currently consuming different features on our platform, and how can we pair that with new and interesting ways for creators to connect with their audience. So once I'm able to take a hold of that feedback, then I'm in this mode where I'm creating a marketing plan and making sure that we can help execute on that. So once we understand which artists or which creators we think would benefit from this feature, then we try to understand what's the best way to get that message out and how can we tell that story in a way that's really compelling, so that we're not just saying, hey, feature X is now available to you, but we're saying, hey, you can now expand your audience or grow your reach, make new connections. Here's how and here's why this will be useful to you.
Anyone else want to check?
Hey. So as I mentioned before, I focus on artist marketing at Apple Music. My day pretty much focuses a lot on strategy. The 3 buckets that I'm mostly focused on, as I mentioned before, is going to be Platoon, which is our client services and distribution arm of Apple Music. So making sure that they get the support and resources that they need off platform and support across our channels. And then for Up Next, which is our emerging artist program, we have artists that we spotlight on a global scale on a monthly basis, just making sure that we have everything together from a marketing standpoint, whether that's through out-of-home, organic, or paid social, making sure that all of our channels have touch points for the artists to have the maximum reach for their fans. And then Apple Music for Artists, which is our dashboard for artists to go in and check their stats on Apple Music, update their bio, see their data, and so on and so forth.
For me, it changes every day. I do a lot on the operations side. So whether that's like handling the release schedules for upcoming releases and sharing that with the partners, or submitting like certifications if something needs an updated, if like a record is gold, submitting and auditing that and sending it to the RIAA. We track pre-orders. I do a lot of tracking for like any upcoming albums or EPs for all of the DSPs. And also for like projections, so trying to project and track like what the weekly streams for our current focuses are each week. So yeah.
And my day-to-day changes as well, like Kaitlyn said, but pretty much it's balancing both creative and strategy. And as you ladies may know, Audiomack is a smaller company, so that requires more work, and that requires just focusing on all the genres and making sure that I'm looking at the analytics and telling a story from that, and making sure that editorial side is taken care of, whether that's push notifications, email, our blog, Audiomack World, and any content related.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So let's get into this. What have been some of your favorite projects to work on? Some projects that you're really proud of? And anyone can hop into this one too.
First. So basically I got into the industry by being a fan first and just going to concerts when I was younger and realizing like, if I see all these people setting up stages and taking them down, like there's a whole world of jobs here. Like, can I go to school for that? So I did a business degree with a music minor, and fast forward from like 4 years ago, I was camping out on the streets, like trying to get a good spot to see like my favorite artists, one of them being Charlie Puth, to now working on like his campaign with his recent singles with Girlfriend, and just helping set up the billboards in Times Square, like getting like playlisting support, stuff like that has been like a whole like full circle moment for me. So definitely that's one of the recent ones.
Phenomenal. That's awesome.
Happy to chime in as well. So for me, I am all about efficiency. So when I see an opportunity to make something better, and when I'm working on a team that has that mission at its core, it's always really exciting and rewarding to see what we're able to pump out. So in my previous role at Pandora, we noticed a large need for labels, artists, and their teams to really understand where their music is getting placed across both stations and playlists, because we know every Friday when new music is released, everybody's curious, okay, where did my artist's music get placed? How can I find it? And on the Pandora side, one of the big questions was, how can we be part of that conversation and make it so it's not purely a win for the artist and label, which we do want, but also an opportunity for that artist and team to be an ambassador for the platform itself. And so we ended up launching something called Pandora Programming Notifications. And essentially what that did was it actually triggered an email notification to your inbox when an artist that you were following within Next Big Sound, Pandora's data and analytics platform, was added to any of those editorial programs. And it was a really cool moment to sort of meet a need that we know had been expressed in a way that was somewhat unique. And it was also something that artists could really easily share on their own social platforms. So we were able to do what I think at streaming services, a lot of us always aim to do. How can we help the artist, but how can we do so in a way that's also going to be mutually beneficial on our side as well? So that was definitely a big win, where we were able to connect the dots between the product and engineering team building the tool, everybody on the ground who is artist facing, label facing, even manager facing, and then making sure we're telling that story so people can see how exciting it is to get these sorts of updates. And by sort of floating this in front of them of like, hey, if you follow an artist as an artist manager or label, here's what you'll get. It sort of prompted additional actions that, you know, we think are beneficial for those teams to take. So definitely an exciting win on our side.
Awesome.
I can go next. I think similar to Kaitlyn, having kind of like that full circle moment. Prior to getting to Apple, I was working at ICM Partners, which is a talent literary agency. I was working for 2 urban agents there at the time. And one of the clients that they had was Victoria Monet. And with Victoria, she was going on tour with Ariana Grande, and it was during a time unfortunately, the Manchester bombings. And I just remember having to really help and support on the back end to make sure she had everything that she needed. And then coming to Apple a few years later and helping to run the entire campaign for her Up Next was really, really full circle for me. And it was super rewarding to see just how appreciative that she was to have the campaign and have this moment, and seeing her kind of step into her own at that point and just having her launch and take off after that. I'm just in awe of her growth. And yeah, this has just been one of my utmost favorite projects to work on.
That's amazing, Celena. Thank you.
And I will just chime in real quick. I think for me, one of my favorite projects I've worked on thus far touched on Black Music Month. And as we all know, the climate, that's, everything between COVID, social injustice, and the timing of social injustice and having Black Music Month being in June, and having to work quickly to be able to implement a program that's, of course, artist facing and giving them the streams, the playlists, and different sort of initiatives to shine light on them while being socially conscious. So for me, that was one of my favorite projects.
That's amazing, Aliyah. That's really special.
For me, I mean, well, this wasn't actually a project, but my full circle fan moment. I'm like the biggest John Mayer fan. That's like half the reason I got my job. I talked about it for like 5 hours in my interview. They probably wanted to kick me out, but last summer we got to go to the MSG show, and he performed Continuum, like my favorite album ever from front to back, and it was like an iconic moment. But actual project, getting to work on, I basically had just joined Sony when the whole Lil Nas X Old Town Road situation was happening. And like that was, I mean, I feel like probably like the first like true like, or I think the first true like global like TikTok smash, and just seeing how that like unfolded, especially from like my role in like global streaming, and how it just like blew up, and like how it went from market to market, and how the trend just like was on fire everywhere. And like then it was like remix after remix after remix, and just all the records that were broken, was just such a cool experience. And then now like seeing how, not how often that happens, but like, you know, TikTok explodes records all the time, but like being a part of like that first one was really cool.
That is awesome, Kaitlyn.
I'm jealous about Lil Nas X. I love him. That was such a cool moment to watch too.
He's a nugget.
Yeah.
I have a random one. When I got to Warner, I was the catalog streaming strategist, and they didn't really have anybody focusing on the catalog. And Warner's known for Green Day and Red Hot Chili Peppers and the greatest bands in the world. So it was my job to just come in and like create structure around their anniversary projects, any holidays, which also includes Michael Bublé's Christmas album, which is my other favorite project because everyone listens to it, and it's a huge streaming moment every year. So that role kind of got dissolved, but it turns out the label is now really focused on catalog for good reason, because, you know, times have changed so much, and it's always propped up labels in terms of revenue and value, but now more than ever, catalog has become a big focus for us. So, and I think all labels. So it's been nice to go in, create structure, create a schedule so they know when anniversaries and things like that are coming up. And now there's like actually some structure in place, and A&Rs are now in place to find what other reissues they can put out. And then now it's being supported by the actual catalog group at Warner as well. So that was a kind of nice handoff. And then of course, working on big artists, but then, you know, we have a lot of developing acts. So seeing them, you know, have big moments like a Billboard in Times Square, for example, like that is like really rewarding because, you know, 2 weeks ago when you're pitching something, you wouldn't know that that could happen. So it's a whole gauntlet of rewarding moments throughout it. And there's lows too.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. These have been some phenomenal moments in your wonderful careers. So let's get into why is streaming so important right now more than ever?
I mean, I think it's always been important. I think COVID just kind of like really put a light on how important it was. I mean, I think everyone in the industry, I mean, streaming's been like the hot buzzword for the last, I don't know how many years, but now just with everything shutting down and like the impact that COVID's had globally, I think people are becoming increasingly aware of how important it is and how we need to, you know, focus our strategy around the thing that's really driving the most revenue. But like it's the end all be all for like the moment. I mean, I think the music industry's dynamic, you know, before streaming was around, streaming wasn't around and no one envisioned it, you know, so like being open to like what's coming and, you know, things could be totally different in the next year, and just constantly educating yourself and like trying to stay ahead of the trends and accepting the trends when they come and like adapting while taking all the, you know, knowledge that we have from everything that we've done and just applying it. Is like the way we need to kind of move forward. Was that the answer? Like, what was the question? I lost myself halfway.
That was the best answer I could ask for from you, Kaitlyn. That was phenomenal. Thank you.
I agree. Obviously, it's always been an important feature of any release campaign, and it's the consumption platform that most people are listening to music on. But I'd say now more than ever, without touring and without other publicity opportunities, you know, there is a reliance and hope for DSPs to help market albums in a meaningful way. I'm also seeing a shift where our streaming team is starting to advise more on like release strategy and timing. And we're a lot more involved up front with the A&R process, sometimes even suggesting what the next single should be. So I find this being at home, like having to be way more connected up front with it. Our label's like a family. And so like from the chairman, you know, down and in between, we're talking about, you know, our baby acts all the way up. So I'd say like streaming has become more important in the sense, not so much for consumption, but just for the value that it gives, in the label analysis is closely connected to that. So projections and all the data, I mean, we're constantly reviewing data, and that dictates a lot of what the next move will be, and sometimes who we sign as well.
Kind of to add on to that, I would say that streaming offers a lot more synergy than maybe there has been in the past. Like when I think about, you know, these major motion pictures having these huge soundtracks, you know, being able to talk to them through streaming and build content around it, it really helps kind of spread not only the music, but also bridges that gap between consumers who are watching the film, but also want to consume and take part in the music. So like when I think about the Black Panther soundtrack and how huge that was for TDE and like what a monumental moment it was culturally in general for that film to release, you know, and then having the opportunity to connect with Kendrick and SZA and then all the other emerging acts that were on it. So I think that's one of the important factors of streaming, that synergy, being able to connect the dots that way. And then as Kaitlyn mentioned before, like the landscape is shifting so much, like we don't really know what it's going to look like in the next few years, but we know that people are shifting their focus on the streaming right now. And I think that it's a great way to get it out there aside of just having traditional mediums like we had before.
Yeah, and even touching on synergy and soundtracking, I think the biggest thing for me and just being consumer, I think it's so important that we you know, of course, look at the business and think of strategy and think of numbers and data, but also having a consumer mindset. And with that is playlisting and being able to tell a story within the playlist and transitioning and being able to make sure that the artists in which you're including within a playlist are, you know, complementing the next artist and thus forth and so on. So definitely want to touch on playlists for sure.
Yeah, playlist is a hot topic right now.
Yeah, I also think it's sort of, you know, coming from the streaming side, it feels like it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we are creating additional lanes for artists to continue making money and continue growing themselves, because we recognize that some of those other streams that they're used to are no longer as readily available during this time. So I know, for instance, SoundCloud introduced the option to donate or pay artists directly through a SoundCloud profile. There was an advance fund that was announced in early April as another opportunity for artists who might be using SoundCloud as a launch pad for whatever else is coming up for them. But these streaming services, I think, are really taking it into themselves to say, all right, we recognize the role that we've had over the last few months and years for artists, but to both Kaitlyn and Selena's points, we are constantly evolving, and we don't just want to be meeting the need as expressed, but we want to make sure that we are paving a path forward that is new and innovative, because we don't want to be the same service that we were 12 months ago or 24 months ago. Things are changing so rapidly that I actually think this additional pressure to be adaptable has been quite beneficial to everyone, because you can't just stick with the status quo. And while in the streaming space, everyone is sort of used to that notion that things will be changing, I do like this idea that the future's uncertainty is actually pushing people to be even more creative than they have in the past, because you don't have the luxury of purely just repeating what you did last time and hoping to have the same results. So I think it's actually been a positive change in the streaming space and getting more people really energized about coming up with that next new thing that's going to be really impactful.
I don't want to cut someone else off, but I agree with that like 1,000%, especially on like the digital side too, because like that's another component of streaming. Like digital and streaming are like so closely tied together. You know, how is digital driving to streaming, you know, and like how are artists, you know, getting more creative during this time because they don't have like the normal promo opportunities and touring and, you know, all of the things that would normally go into a release cycle. So on one hand, that obviously sucks, but on the other hand, it's definitely creating creativity too. Like DJ Khaled's music video with Popstar, he had Justin Bieber star in it instead of Drake because of like all of the COVID restrictions, and that would never have happened before, but it was an awesome video. You know, it's kind of, obviously everything that's happening is terrible, but it's interesting to see how some artists are stepping up to the challenge and like the creativity that's coming out of it.
Yeah, that was iconic.
Yes, I loved that video. I agree too. I feel like a lot of it that I've been seeing too is the audience and like the consumers and just fans in general, just like taking on like the role of, okay, there's no touring right now. I can't go see my artists. What can I do? And we're seeing it on TikTok with these artists blowing up and going crazy, and everyone is going straight to the platforms to go make playlists for top TikTok songs, and just everything that has been like popping and like blowing up during quarantine, I feel like is translating directly to streaming because that's just like the home for all the music. So I feel like we've always been like that place, but especially during this time with no touring and no like radio promo, this is a place where like artists are connecting not only on their socials, but also through like the streaming services.
Agreed.
And there's a live question that we could answer maybe about how to like revisit a song that's already out from Hillary and motivate the DSPs. You know, once the song is out, I mean, obviously week one, there's so much like pressure and expectation depending on the artist. And we found that like just have to track the data. Oftentimes, like if you're lucky enough, you have a big spike and then it'll kind of level and then maybe you see another spike or the horseshoe, as you call it. There needs to be some organic demand, you know, something getting fans to go to the artist platform and getting them to go do it rather than just being discovered on a playlist. Because as you guys will eventually see, and playlists are a catalyst to success and consumption, but they can't be the only spark. So TikTok's been mentioned a few times. Obviously, those are huge moments that drive consumption, and a couple weeks after, there's a big moment in TikTok. So, you know, what I've found is just keeping an eye on the data makes a difference. If there is no data to take back to your DSP, you know, we have to find off-platform drivers that, you know, we hit up Celena, like what other marketing opportunities are out there, you know, and get creative with like Brittany at SoundCloud and figure out, okay, we're not maybe seeing a lot of consumption, but maybe we should have our artists do the live Q&A event and, you know, get some eyeballs on them there. So, you know, we have to be in partnership, but also get creative and have ownership, because it's not just on the DSPs and playlisting.
I agree. I say this all the time, but like, you know, playlisting isn't like getting a playlist isn't a marketing strategy. You also don't necessarily always want to get added to a playlist like too early if you really have like a really developing artist, because if you have like the song exposed before there's like really good familiarity, you might actually end up like hurting yourself more and like, you know, driving up your skip rate, or, you know, negatively impacting like potential like algorithmic opportunities down the line. So like she was saying, like following the data, if you have the data, and there needs to be some sort of activity happening to, you know, really warrant trying to reach for that next ask, you know, because you also want to prioritize, or not prioritize, but understand from like the DSP perspective, prioritizing like the user experience too. Like if it doesn't make sense to get at it, like, you know, it's a balance between seeing if it fits into the editorial landscape and, you know, seeing how you can help drive it there from like organic activity or doing things off platform, or, you know, reaching out and seeing if there's partnerships available that might end up getting you to a place where it makes more sense to get at it. That's going to be beneficial for both the artist and the DSP.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you for that one, Hillary. And on to our next question. So people often talk about the challenges of being a woman in music, a male-dominated field. What are some of the positives of being a woman in music?
I'll start. I feel like just being a woman in music has such a community overall. Just there's always like, anytime I've been referred to a job or referring someone, I always have like 10 females sticking their hand up ready to support. It's just a lot of girl power and making sure if you have like a silly question or something, there's always someone to go to. It's just a community. There's industry networking groups strictly for females, and I just think that's amazing. And just having that type of like support group to fall back on, whether it's just like at different companies with like people you're working with or within your own department, I think is super helpful and definitely a positive.
Yeah, I think in addition to having a community and being able to relate with like-minded individuals and ladies is also we're so detail oriented, and our perspective, I feel as though, just brings new ideas to the table. So even if it may not be communicated in the moment, more than likely your idea is being taken seriously, and it will be, you know, appreciated in the long run because we pick up on little things.
Yeah. Sure do.
I would say positives being a woman in the industry, respectfully, is like proving people wrong. I think that a lot of times we are counted out and we're counted against. And I think that, you know, being a woman and then adding the other identity layers that we have that make us who we are, a lot of times I feel like there's been opportunities where I've showed up to meetings and have people text me afterwards like, I'm really impressed, or thanks for sharing that. And I'm like, of course, like, what do you mean? And I don't say that to be cocky or arrogant or anything like that, but I just think it's a testament that, you know, trusting yourself and believing yourself is really important. I think sometimes I have the imposter syndrome of sorts. And I think that, you know, when I'm able to get over that hump and I'm able to prove it to myself before anyone else, it's just like that extra nudge to be like, okay, well, I know I could do this, and having you see that I could do this too just makes it that much better.
Totally agree. And I think from my experience in a very cross-functional role. Sometimes I'm working with product and engineering colleagues, and other times I'm working with artists and creators themselves, and you have to use very different language. You have to talk about things differently just depending on who that end user is or end audience. And Celena, to your point, being in the room of engineers or product managers who are maybe exclusively male, and being able to get in that room and say, hey, I might not even have the same expertise that you do. I'm not an engineer, but I am a capable human being that's able to interpret what you're telling me and make it into something digestible that anybody can understand, whether they're an artist or a data analyst at a label. So I think, to your point, Celena, it can be really rewarding when leaving that room and have people say like, oh yeah, like, actually, can you join this other meeting that we're having because there's a need for your skill set? And I think you do get this opportunity to prove people wrong if there are any incorrect assumptions out there, which can be really nice. And then on the other side, I think because a lot of the industry is still male dominated, not only are you able to build a community amongst other people working in the industry on the business side, but with the moments I've had with female artists and with women artists, I think people have like loved that there's someone else they feel they can relate to in the room. And just to speak to my sort of big fan moment, I had an opportunity to bring Lizzo through her data on the Pandora platform and show her where her fans were and everything else. And that was right after she had just played some of her tracks in the new album about a year and a half ago. I'm probably getting the dates wrong, but because I love you. And she, when the song played with Somebody Come Get This Man, and like the fact that I was able to like lean in being like, I hear you, I feel you, and I relate, was just like a really cool moment that I think not everybody else in the room was able to provide. So I think in a lot of different ways, it can help you build connects and represent for women all over that you deserve to be in the room, but other women deserve to be in the room too and have their own voice.
Nicely said. Sometimes we have signing meetings and stuff and they like, we need women, like the female artists are like, we need to have women in there. And obviously women of color is like even another component of value. And I think perspective that we bring, as everybody's now already said. But yeah, Brittany, a lot of artists, they want women on the team. And frankly, like we're relatable. We're also consumers. And they want, people, if it's a female artist, they want to know that people who understand them and who look like them, are working on their stuff as well. So definite advantage. And I'm one of 2 women on the streaming and analysis team. So and a lot of people we pitch are men. I've just noticed like some of the DSPs are either the whole team is women or the whole team is men. It's interesting how it just kind of makes up, but I'm sure it changes over time. But yeah.
I'm actually on a team that's pretty much predominantly all women. We only have, it's like, I want to say we have at least 30 people, and I think we have 3 men we have 3 men on the whole team, which is a really great environment to be in. But obviously the larger industry is a whole other conversation. But I think, like everyone's saying too, like music is marketed to women. I mean, obviously to men too, but like think about like stan culture. We're talking about playlisting. That's largely, typically more of a female behavior. But I think, one of the downsides that we talk about too is like, I get imposter syndrome. I think everyone gets imposter syndrome, but almost one of the like benefits of that is like, I don't know if benefits is the right word, but like there's a fine line between like hubris and confidence. And I think because maybe we second guess ourselves a lot, like it is so important to be confident and to be confident in your ideas and in your value, because that all really matters. But I think that we're also more open-minded and like willing to listen to other perspectives and ideas, and like aren't just going to go like gung-ho, like this is my idea, this is what we should be doing, because we kind of question ourselves. But then you get to an answer that's actually probably more valuable than just going on your first like gut instinct. But I also agree with what everyone's saying, and it's something like I think myself need to work on more about, being confident and like not letting imposter syndrome get into us, especially because like with streaming, it's a lot of data, it's a lot of male dominated type situations, and you know, not letting that stop you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. So we are on to our last question. What advice do you have for young women who want to get into music streaming?
Go, Celena.
Okay, I was just gonna say, personally, I've only been working in music for about 4 years now. Before that, I was working in sports, and I never would have thought I would end up at Apple Music, let alone working with the people that I do. But I say that to say that coming up through my journey, I just never really thought like what would be possible within the landscape. And I was just talking to my roommate about this the other day, but like you could literally do anything within music. And what I mean by that is that because it's shifting so much and the needs of artists are so specific sometimes, and there's so many niche genres, and there's literally something for everyone. If you see an opportunity and you have a passion that meets it, you could really do it. Like, you know, people who didn't have streaming before, it didn't just come out of thin air. They had a passion for it to connect music on a global scale. And look, now here it is now. And then we see even, you know, TV and movie executives, they're investing more money into music and opportunities to, you know, invest in music supervision and everything like that. So I would say that just because you don't see a lane that you might necessarily fit in right now doesn't mean you can't create it. It doesn't mean that it won't exist in the future. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I also see, Shayla, you had asked the question specifically for me on getting into the industry. And being that I'm so new, I'm sure these ladies have so much more advice than me. But for me, what really worked is, one, being passionate. When I was at my previous jobs, I was super, super passionate about playlisting and building a story from that. And I believe that what you put in is what you get out. And, you know, despite the whole cliche of the universe working its powers, is also building relationships and, you know, meeting and going on LinkedIn and making sure that, you know, you're putting yourself out there and being genuine, and the role will find you.
I think one like really practical thing is like we said a million times, like it's a very dynamic industry that's continually evolving. So like read a lot. Like I set up like a Google alert for like digital music streaming, I think when I was in college, and like it sounds stupid and like super easy, but it's been so helpful. Even if you don't actually end up reading all the articles, like you're starting to like stay in the know more and like just like knowing what the overall conversation is, and it helps you then when you want to reach out to someone to get coffee, you know kind of what world they're living in, and you can ask educated questions and really like set yourself up better for success. But I mean, it is such a hard industry to like break into. I think it sounds cliche, but like don't give up. Like the role like will find you. The timing might not be ideal. Like in college I did a ton of internships, like all in the music industry, like C3, Lollapalooza, Sony, et cetera. But when I got out of college, it took me, I think, almost 6-8 months before I ended up getting my job. And that's why I ended up taking a job at like an ad agency first, just to like get to New York to get started, while still like doing all the hustle to like get to the job I actually wanted. And when it finally came, I said deuces to the ad agency and I got there, but like, I didn't give up on it. I was still, it might not land into your lap the right second. And so you can like, don't feel bad if you like end up taking like a different job first. Like your first job's not going to be your last job. So just like it is a relationships game at the end of the day. So like reaching out to people, getting coffee, everyone has done it. Most people are willing to do it. And even if they don't, the worst thing you did was send an email and no one answered. So just don't give up, because if you want it, it will work out. And like everyone is saying, like working on your own projects on the side, like helping to build your story, like even if you do end up taking a job outside the industry, like making sure that you're doing things that like keep you relevant and like building your profile and make it so that it's hard to say no to you, that like everyone wants you on their team.
I 100% agree with that, like spot on everything there. I feel like it's just going for it, like not being afraid, because I know I was hesitant, at least being like, okay, I have an accounting degree. Do I go work in accounting? It's not what I'm passionate about. Like, I know I'll succeed and I know I have a job secured after graduation, whatever, but don't, like, if you're passionate about something, follow it. I'm so happy I did not go that way and decided to go towards music. When I was in college, I wasn't sure how to get internships. So I just feel like looking at all of your options and coming up with your own. When I was going to Firefly Music Festival with my friends, we were about to buy tickets and noticed there was like a thing where you could volunteer for a free ticket and you work. We didn't know when we signed up that we'd be picking trash up at 8 a.m. while they were doing sound check, but that was what I signed up for. So I was excited, put that on my resume when I was applying for internships. And that helped me get my first internship because we had a laugh being like, okay, we could tell that you really want to do this. Like, you're trying everything. So any way you can, especially in the pandemic, do certifications online. There's so many courses that are for free. There's also the paid ones through schools, but like I was just recently doing like YouTube certifications just to add to your resume, like anything that you can do to build yourself, because it's competitive there's, especially now, there's going to be 100 people looking at the same job as you. So you want to make yourself stand out. And I definitely agree with the side projects and just anything that will make you stand out. So.
Agreed. Can you hear me okay? Everything's frozen, but I wanted to chime in if the audio is still working all right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So definitely agree with all of those points and not being afraid to take a job that isn't your dream job. I think a lot of this also comes down to getting good at really pinpointing your transferable skills. So for me, my first full-time salaried role in the music industry was at TuneCore, and the first slew of responsibilities I had were very close to customer service in any industry. But when I talked about that opportunity, I wasn't talking about it purely as customer service, but I'm talking about the other skills that I used in order to be good at that job, in order to recommend change within the company so that we could optimize certain processes. I gained experience managing certain relationships by the end of my time there. So whether it's within the music industry or outside of it, I've also been a youth soccer coach, youth lacrosse coach, and done a few other things on the side. Obviously, coaching sports is not the same as working in the music industry, but there are certainly skills that one can pull from one experience to the next, even before you've started to gain some experience in the industry itself. So I wouldn't be afraid to really take a look at what you've done and extract what you think might be really relevant for that next opportunity. And in general, I think it's always helpful to bounce ideas off of somebody else. I think when other people are trying to figure out their next step, I end up being their support system. But when I'm looking for my next step, I start second guessing myself. So really opening myself up to other people in this space and other people that know me very well has allowed me to get that extra push and encouragement that I need to prove to myself, yeah, I do know what I'm doing that is relevant here. It's at least worth a shot, and I'll leave it to those people to determine whether or not I'm worth pulling in for an extra conversation. So don't be afraid to enlist the people in your life that you know are your support system to sort of push you to take action, because ultimately we all sometimes need that to end up in a place that we're happier and the people around us are happier for us to be in that spot as well.
They said everything. But I will add that if you want to get in streaming specifically, you should probably start to get familiar with data in any way that you can. It's not that you have to be a math expert, because I was an art student, so I'm definitely not into that. But learning how to tell a story with the data, as I touched on before, like if you're seeing a spike, investigate what could be driving the trend. Obviously, if you're not at a record label or at a DSP and you don't feel like you have data at your fingertips, you can like use the Spotify charts, for example, because it tends to show you what is trending. There's a viral chart, there's a US top 50. Once a song breaks into the US top 50, you tend to see momentum shift for the track. You can compare it to what's going on globally in that top 200 playlist as well. And then get familiar with every DSP, because they all like have different consumption behaviors. Like Spotify is very playlist driven. Apple's now really getting serious with their playlist game. They've obviously been very release driven beforehand, and obviously listeners engage with it differently too. And then like just keep your ears to the streets. There's really no other way to put it. Like get familiar with events, learn what's driving the trends. Obviously TikTok is one of the biggest things at the moment. So if you're on TikTok and you keep seeing the same song, start digging around in the DSPs and see like, is it playlisted? Is it already being picked up? And a lot of you guys are asking about like editors and stuff. It's like, that's probably one tool that they use. Certainly they have other metrics that I don't know. But a lot of the stuff will get picked up in the algorithm within the streaming services as well, because there is just natural momentum. Fans are just going to that person's page, they're adding it to their collection, they're listening nonstop, and so it'll spin up there. It happens at YouTube a lot, it happens at Spotify. I'm not as familiar with SoundCloud's algorithm and how theirs works. They're so technical, so Brittany, we need a sidebar. But you know, so there are all the different facets at each DSP. You don't have to be like a number expert, but I would get, you know, familiar with numbers, you know, knowing percentages and week over week trends, and then how to tell the story. Because what is at our fingertips, someone already pointed out, like having like the Google alerts, like for what's popping in digital space, it's such a great idea, because then you can compare, you know, there's always a TikTok article coming out, you know, there's always something that you can try to connect the dots. So that's some good work that you could do on the side if you want to be streaming savvy. And then of course, if you do get the opportunity to interview at a label or a DSP, even management companies all have, most of them have streaming teams as well. So it doesn't just have to be a label. Then you can start to be more comfortable with how, you know, streaming works, and you don't have to be an expert up front. And then just, you know, have some familiarity with trends and how things are working.
I agree with that 100% too. Like data is like the end game for a lot of like how decisions are being made. Like all of our jobs involve data, but also like don't be intimidated by it. Like me too, I was not a math person. I was a journalism and PR major. Like math was my worst subject always. Like my team laughs at me all the time about that. But like at the end of the day, like everything she just said, like it's consumer behavior. Like are people like going to an artist page and like finding the track that's showing that they're, you know, engaged and they care about that and they're specifically looking for it, and that shows that there's momentum, you know. So like you're gonna have to be able to like interpret different like graphs and different reports and stuff, but you're not actually going to be like needing to do some crazy analytics, like wild sort of like analysis. There, like we have like on the label side, we have label analysts that do that. So like they're doing like the hard work, and you just have to be able to interpret the data and tell the story. So like you definitely need to be comfortable with numbers. You definitely need to be comfortable with like the whole concept, but like don't let that stop you if you're not like a math person or a numbers person. At the end of the day, you're interpreting information and like getting down to like what are people doing and why, and like what's resonating and what isn't, and how is that going to inform your next strategic decision.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna add on saying that, adding to Adrienne's point, as far as being on every DSP. Of course, I work for Audiomack, love Audiomack, definitely suggest checking it out. However, prior to working for Audiomack, I was on every single DSP. And even if you don't have that data in front of you, it's super important to just understand, why are some consumers going to Apple? Why are some consumers going to Tidal, SoundCloud, whatever the case may be, and just indulge in that, you know? Sorry.
No, you're good. I was going to say on the flip side of data, though, I think sometimes for me, especially working in a space where I'm focused on emerging artists who don't necessarily have like that brand identity or recognition yet, for me, it's like I recognize that when I put forth a campaign, sometimes I'm not always going to meet my business KPIs. I'm not always going to get a ton of trials off of an artist campaign. I'm not always going to get the most engagement or streams. However, if I am keeping my ear to the ground and understanding what culture is saying and I'm supporting it, I think that's also something that, you know, develop a skill set that way. It's like, yes, it's important to interpret, analyze data, and use that to tell a story, and especially to meet your business needs and KPIs. But for me, like a lot of times I have to get a little crafty and figure out, okay, well, how I'm going to make sure that this artist still feels supported and that they're resonating not only with their fans, but it's opening up new opportunities to get new people to engage and listen to them. So if an artist that doesn't really have like a strong fan base is really bubbling up all of a sudden for whatever reason, I want to make sure that our team is uplifting and supporting them, even if they only have like 2,000 followers. Like for me, that makes a big difference in the way that I market.
And Celena touched on, you know, culture. So all of you guys are probably on Instagram and on the internet all day, you know, and so that'll determine a lot of what drives popularity, attention in the long run. And then people like Celena will be identifying it up front and will look like a genius, you know, when their artist is up next and, you know, off to the races. So there's a lot of ways, entry points into the industry. And I'm sure by the time most of you guys are graduating college, like there'll be a new platform that you could help launch and be a part of and, you know, be an expert at before we've even figured out what's happening too.
Yeah.
That's another good point. Like, especially if you're getting an internship and stuff, like your perspective does matter. Like it's important to listen and absorb all that information, but there's a reason you're there. Like once you're in the industry and like at a label or a company like this for so many years, you get so stuck, or not, you have to get stuck, but people tend to get stuck in like how things have always been or like doing things the same way. But like at the end of the day, most of the time we're marketing to like college age, high school age, you know, people that are like really crazy music fans, right? So like you're the fan, like never be embarrassed about being a fan. Like I think sometimes people are embarrassed to be like, oh, I'm like a mega fan of X, Y, and Z. Like you have a perspective that's important. Like these are the people we're trying to reach, you know? So like never let that, never be embarrassed about that and like speak up. Like even if you think it's dumb, like, or even if you think, oh, well, you know, someone else would have had that idea, like they would have said it. Like your perspective does matter because you're coming from, you know, a generation and a group and a demographic that everyone's trying to reach. And so you have a unique insight into like how you guys think and, you know, what you want and what you're seeing and how that can inform strategy.
Exactly. Well, thank you all so much for this wonderful advice and this amazing panel. And thank you everyone for being here and attending our first ever streaming panel. Like I said, make sure you hit us on Instagram at Amethyst Collab, super simple. Give us a follow, hit our DMs, tell us what you thought of this panel, and keep a lookout for our next panel, which is Women in Music Journalism on September 23rd. Thank you all, have a good night.
Thank you.